Good afternoon, fellow Clevelanders. This is Senna.
And this is Amelia.
Welcome to the Cleveland Action News. As a special feature of our program today, we will be discussing how the lack of high-quality education is exacerbating the problem of poverty in East Cleveland. This problem stems from a ruthless drive for profit and the disparity it causes between the rich and poor, a particularly harmful side effect of globalization. We will then talk about how one special school model is working to combat this toxic cycle of poverty.
In a city with a population of 17,375 people, East Cleveland has a rather high poverty rate, standing at 40.5%. The average East Clevelander lives below the poverty line with an average income of $21,184 a year, and the city is home to a 91.1% majority of African Americans. These statistics warrant examination of the realities of the poverty cycle and who it affects. Generation after generation, the poor cannot seem to escape the hold of poverty, and in the case of East Cleveland, this poverty cycle is turning to hurt many African Americans.
East Cleveland City Schools received a grade of an F on the 2015 report card for both its 4-year and 5-year graduation cohort rates. Almost 30% of the district's students failed to graduate on time, and the district's 5-year rates do not show much improvement. 98.5% of students who took the ACT were forced to retake the test another time due to low scores. In addition, East Cleveland faces significant achievement gaps, and those gaps are not narrowing fast enough.
Those are some startling statistics.
Yeah, and I actually feel like they call for a deeper analysis. So can you tell us what exactly is causing these problems?
Yeah, so I actually think that the lack of achievement can be attributed to the lack of prioritizing school. So this problem actually stems from poverty and the stress that is caused from that. So if you think about it, if you were like a student that was living in a low socioeconomic status home, you would not really be knowing like where your next meal might be coming from. So you're not really going to think, oh, did I finish my math homework or anything like that. So as it turns out, these students that come from low SES homes experience increased rates of high school dropouts and decreased college attendances with poorer health and also overall lower lifetime earnings than children who live in high SES homes. So these students have more urgent needs to satisfy than school. They need to eat, they need to sleep, they need to survive. So yeah, I think those are the reasons.
Thank you. In fact, our guest, Morgan C. Fink, has written about the causes behind the lack of achievement in East Cleveland schools.
Yes, Senna, this poverty and lack of achievement can be traced back to a discriminatory practice by which banks and insurance companies would actually refuse or limit loans, mortgages, insurance, etc., all kinds of things. And they would do this within specific geographic areas, especially towards inner city neighborhoods, when this is known as redlining. Now, many of the Cleveland neighborhoods that banks redlined almost a century ago are still facing the effects of this today, including a lot of high poverty rates and crime.
To understand these problems better from an ethical perspective, we need to assess them through the lens of Catholic social teaching. A lack of internalizing the CSC principles has led to the previously described injustices. I know in your book, Morgan, you talked a little bit about the different Catholic social teaching principles and how they can be applied to poverty in East Cleveland. Could you please elaborate on that?
Yes, I could. Unfortunately, we often really forget the needs of our neighbors, and basically anytime when we are thinking about an issue, we kind of assess it from our own point of view instead of other people's, and this isn't good because in reality we have a lot of impoverished brothers and sisters. You know, many times when we're weighing the pros and cons of political issues especially, we do only really consider how they will affect us, not other people. You know, sometimes when people say, oh, there's poverty all over, we have a tendency to think of, you know, starving kids in Africa. We don't really think about the people in our own backyard, for example, like in East Cleveland. And I think that's what we really need to focus on doing, is helping people that we can most immediately help.
So from what Morgan told us, it is apparent that there are many different possible applications of theological principles. Amelia, could you probably give us a few examples on how we can apply principles to the problems of poverty?
Yeah, so by failing to understand and respect that all humans have an inherent dignity as children made in the likeness and image of God, we have a facilitated discrimination against certain groups of people, as well as was with the case with redlining, as Morgan previously mentioned. So by giving preference to the poor and vulnerable, this would allow us to focus on the resources of disadvantaged communities and aid in ending in the negative effects of redlining. So this principle encourages us to empathize with others and also feel a need to contribute to the betterment of the community, which is ultimately going to end poverty.
Actually, I also think that it is important to consider that all humans have a fundamental right to life. And they also have a right for things that are required for human decency. And from what you said, I think it is apparent that in our schools that students should have a right to education, because a good education is needed to foster success in our society. Actually, I really like what you said about how we need to better our community. In addition to that, I think that all humans really have a fundamental right to life and a right to those things that are required for human decency. In the way that our society runs, a good education is needed to foster success. So students in districts that repeatedly fail in producing individuals who go on to learn more than their parents, they're trapped in a vicious cycle of poverty. So it is their right to have an education and work their next generation out of poverty, but only when given the resources to prosper. The part of this is a virtue of solidarity. And this is the pursuit of justice and peace. In order to have solidarity in our society, we need to look at the more vulnerable members, and we need equal education in every school district. So students need to understand how important education is in the ending of the chronic poverty cycle, and there must be programs developed that contact the issue at its source.
Yeah, it's definitely on us, I feel, to implement programs and get poverty at its source. Just like the children in the river, you can't just keep picking up the children, you have to go to the source and try and fix it. All right, can you give me an example of like a program that combats this poverty cycle?
Yeah, actually, an example of a school that has been exemplary in transforming the East Cleveland School District is St. Martin de Porres.
I've heard of
The goal of the school is to provide an innovative, high-quality, intensive college prep curriculum for students who typically may not be able to afford it. So all their students actually come from families with limited economic means. All the students are involved in a work-study program, and that helps them cover a portion of their tuition. In addition, their values are rooted in Catholic tradition, so based on that, they aspire to build a community of care which prepares the students to become men and women of faith, purpose, and service. Their vision is also to instill values of communication, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, good work habits, and commitment to justice and peace.
That's an interesting sort of setup for a school.
Yeah, it's actually based on the Cristo Rey model, which started off as a single high school in Chicago, and its mission was to transform urban America by empowering students from low economic communities and encouraging them to attend college.
I've actually heard of that schooling model. The Cristo Rey model actually encourages students to have a part of their education through the unique work-study program where the students actually work 1 day a week out of the school week. And by attending school at a rate of 97% daily attendance, with 15,500 students graduating through the Cristo Rey network of schooling, it has been proven quite successful. So it also doesn't stop there. Students who attend these schools are actually 3 times more likely to complete a bachelor's degree by the age of 24 in comparison to the total U.S. low-income population. So this schooling model is doing something. So I know you have some experience with the Cristo Rey model of schooling at St. Martin de Porres High School here in Cleveland. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, I can.
All right.
Actually, as people coming from more fortunate backgrounds, we really need to take a step back from all this,
I
and
agree.
we have to reflect on what we can do to help.
Mm-hmm.
Now, after all, no change is really going to occur at all if no one else that's otherwise unrelated to the problem steps up and decides to contribute something to the problem. Now, speaking from personal experiences, I can tell you that it is not that difficult to get involved with this issue. I have had the opportunity to go to St. Martin de Porres once a week and to lead philosophical discussions there. First, this was kind of a daunting task to try to go and engage high school students that I didn't really know in a philosophical discussion, but as the weeks went on, things did get a little bit easier. Now, not all of the students would really pay attention to each of the conversations, but the ones that did, it made this experience so much more memorable and so much more unique. Now, not discussing philosophy, it's not really directly going to solve their problems as far as poverty, things like that, but it's just a ministry of presence. It's just the fact that we're being there, showing our support, showing our solidarity, and showing them that people care. People care about the problems they have.
So do you feel that you benefited from this experience, like as much as you have benefited the students there?
Yes, I actually do, because it was very beneficial just to have the chance to get to know people that I wouldn't have otherwise even come into contact with ever.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really interesting. And what I found out was that these are just teenagers, just like we were a couple years ago. They're just struggling to find their place in life like everybody else. They just happen to have a lot of cards stacked against them. But this doesn't mean that they're not valid human beings. They are, and they deserve the same opportunities to succeed as everybody else like us do.
Wow, I really am very glad that you have come here to speak to us today about your book and about your experience at St. Martin de Porres, and I wish you good luck in your future endeavors.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And again, the title of that book, in case you want to order it online, is Poverty in East Cleveland: The Causes, Effects, and Solutions from a Catholic Perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So me and Amelia actually volunteered at St. Martin de Porres as well, and we helped students in an Algebra 1 credit recovery class.
Yeah, and I actually noticed that these students seemed very college focused. Like, I had a couple conversations with students between worksheets and stuff, and they would say, "Hey, how do you like John Carroll, and how do you like it? Do you think I can go there? Like, what's your opinion of it?" And I was really like happy to see like they had a future goal like in their mind, and yeah.
See, although that is true, I do think that one problem that we observed was that many of the students, they seemed like really distracted from their schoolwork, and we actually think that this may be a result of them still facing poverty in their homes.
Yeah, so I think one special point that is missing from the table is that their parents are missing from the table. The parents aren't really seeing the benefits that the students are having, and so they are still struggling in their homes, and they're not really able to get their family out of the poverty cycle, while the students themselves, hopefully, their generation will be out of the poverty cycle.